When you were younger, did you ever make fun of your dad for doing the same thing all the time? And then now that you're a dad or a grandpa, you do the same things he did? I used to really get on my dad's case because he was an avid listener to WGN radio. Him and Wally Phillips. Oh my God. And I would make fun of my dad. I said, Dad, there's so much other good stuff on the radio. And Wally Phillips. Well, now I'm the same way. I listen to WGN all the time. And I remember a few years ago when Bob Collins died, when his plane went down. And the afternoon guy, who was Spike Odell at the time, took over for Bob Collins. And I remember writing a sermon the Sunday after Bob Collins died. It was about the voices we hear in the background, and somehow, some way, we take those voices for granted. And I sent the sermon to Spike Odell. I mean, he gets some good mail, not sermons in the mail. And so I was playing basketball a few days later in the gym, and my secretary runs back there and said, Don, Spike Odell is on the phone. I said, yeah, sure. Well, he was. So I went in the kitchen and got on the phone and talked to Spike Odell for about a half an hour about Bob Collins. And so I'm listening to WGN radio the other day, and now it's Steve Cochran. And I don't really pay a lot of attention because sometimes it's just in the background. But on this morning, Steve Cochran was interviewing a Syrian doctor who was just about ready to get on the plane at O'Hare. And the Syrian doctor, who's an American citizen, was making his 30th plane trip to Syria to take care of all the kids that get injured. And they were talking about what's going on in Syria, which sometimes we don't even know. I mean, Syria is being destroyed. Hundreds and hundreds of lives are being taken. Hospitals are being bombed. Kids are injured and losing their lives. And Steve Cochran said, Doctor, if you don't mind me asking you, with all that going on, why do you go back there? And he says, I go back there because I have to. I go back there because those are my people. I go back there because I'm drawn. Those are my roots. And I think those words we say all the time, that all of us are God's children, that there are no strangers in the world, that we're all in this thing called life together. So when you hear about something like that that's happening so many miles away, what can we do? And why should we care? And what difference can we make? Then I think that 2 weeks ago, I mentioned to you that there was one young person named Spencer, who none of you know. He's a student at Stagg. He's a straight-A student. He needs a lung transplant. His parents have no money. And I simply said, for the next 2 weeks, the love bucket is for Spencer. And today I handed Debbie Ferraro, who teaches him, a check for $1,000. $1,000 that you put in love bucket for 2 weeks. And I realize, in life, that's all we can do. I mean, we can't change what's happening in Syria. There's no way we can make up for that. There's no way that one doctor can go there and heal all the wounds. But all we can do in life is to care about this world, one person and one moment at a time. And somehow, some way, in making a difference in a stranger named Spencer's life, somehow that lifts us up. That lifts the world up. It lifts Syria up. Somehow, some way in God's kingdom, it makes a little bit of a difference. So what can we do? You light a candle. You give a buck. Go to a nursing home and walk up and down the hallway and just sit down and talk to one or two people. Make that phone call you've been thinking about making for the last 3 months. Say a prayer. This Thanksgiving or Christmas, give something from the very guts and fiber of who you are unto somebody else so that person's world is a little bit brighter. Does that change the world? No. But it changes that moment. It can change that person, and it can change us just a little bit. You see, there's got to be a heaven. Because all those little kids in Syria, the 10-year-old in Englewood who shot on his porch, The young lady that you know that gives everything and then her life is cut short by cancer. All those people that never had a chance to fulfill their dreams, there's got to be something on the other side where they can walk tall and dream again and have the life that God wants them to have. Because somewhere out there is a kingdom and a power that is bigger than you and me. In the meantime, while we're here, we need to use our moments and our days to make a difference, just a little bit at a time. You see, that's what religion is all. I've been doing a lot of thinking about religion. And that's why I put on the sign, keep it simple. Because you know something? Religion ultimately is pretty simple. We are the ones who have made it complicated. For example, in the lessons for today, the first lesson says that God is going to raise up a righteous branch to bring justice into the world. The second lesson talks about a God who rescues us out of darkness. And the gospel is that crucifixion story where Jesus says to the criminal, today you will be with me in paradise. Now those words are not Lutheran or Catholic. They're not Islam or Jewish. They're not Hindu or Unitarian. Those are just human words about a higher power that comes into our lives to make the world better. We put labels on it. We build temples and mosques and churches. We make rules who's in and who's out. We take that simple message and clutter it with stuff. But we're here, hopefully on Sunday and Thursday night, to unclutter it, to kind of rediscover the simplicity and the power of God's Spirit. Speaking of religion, I went to Marion Village on Wednesday. It's assisted living. It's Catholic assisted living. They have a beautiful chapel. They've got masses every single day. They have a spiritual director there who's a delightful lady. And so I guess both Lutherans who live there asked her, can we possibly have a Lutheran service once in a while? And so she must have Googled conservative Lutherans and came up with my name. So she said, is there any chance, Reverend Borling, that you could come here on Wednesday and do a service? We'll see how it goes and see if it's something they want. And I said, but if you advertise this as a Lutheran service, I guarantee you, nobody's going to come. Because the word Lutheran in and of itself makes people who are non-Lutheran feel like it's not for them. And so I said, if you advertise it as a service open to all people, I'll come. And so she did. And I got there on Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and the place started to fill up. And this one little cute Catholic lady, she's 100 years old and as robust as you can imagine. She wasn't using a walker. She had on gym shoes, 100 years old. And she said, Reverend, will this be a full mass? And I said, maybe 2/3 of a mass. And I said, look it, there's communion on the altar. I will have a few intentions. Notice how I use the word intentions. I will read the gospel. I'll have a brief meditation. Now, is that full mass enough for you? And she said, well, we'll see. We'll see. And then, just before I started, this guy comes up to me with a Bible under his arm, and he is a dyed-in-the-wool Missouri Synod Lutheran. And he proudly announces who his pastor is and where he goes to church, and then he asks me, now, Reverend Borling, is this going to be a real worship service? And I said, stick around and find out. And then you can let me know afterwards if it was real enough for you. But see, these kind of encounters are the very reason I just love getting up in the morning. Because they fuel my soul. And they remind me how religion and the church just gets in the way of God sometimes. Sometimes experiencing the good Lord and His Spirit is behind all the gunk. And sometimes our job is to unclutter the gunk and get to the Spirit. And then in my brief meditation, I just told the people, and it was really a delightful group. I said, we're here from different traditions, primarily Lutheran and Catholic and a little bit else. And I said, guess what? When you were born into this world, when we're born in this world, when you're a kid, you don't know what religion is. You just know what life is. You see the colors. You see the magic. And if you're lucky enough to be born into a good family, you know what love is just by the way people touch you and talk to you. And then we grow up, and your parents make you into Catholics and Lutherans and Methodists and everything else. And we have rules, we build walls, and somehow, some way, those can separate us. Then I said, look at us now. I said, you and I'm getting there. We're in the twilight of our lives. We don't have a lot of time left. And sometimes when we get older, we rediscover that all that stuff that we learned about religion, that all those rules and stuff don't make any difference anymore. All that makes a difference is now. Coming together. Worshiping the one God that brings us together. Yep, this is religion. Being together. Worshiping a God of strength and hope and healing. And our intention is always to keep this message alive. A message of hope and healing